Hello everyone, I'm Rachel Forster and I'm Director of Communications and Engagement at the Infected Blood Compensation Authority, and thank you so much for joining us, giving up part of your evening today, and welcome. This is the first community-wide webinar organised and led by IBCA, that's the Infected Blood Compensation Authority, and we'll be doing many more of these. In fact, the next session is on the 15th of April, and it's really important to us that we get to hear your questions and we get to speak with you direct. So thank you again for raising questions and concerns that matter most to you. So as we mentioned in the invitation for this webinar, the session will be recorded, but we want to make absolutely sure that we're treating personal information with care. So your names will be anonymised as you've joined, and your personal details will also be removed from the recording, which will be published on our website for those who are unable to attend today. You'll also notice that the Q&A bar where you can ask questions in the chat isn't open during this session, and the good reason for that is we want to make absolutely sure that all of your questions are being seen and heard on the Slido link that we sent out prior to this meeting, just so we don't lose track of all those important questions. We will be sharing a QR code on screen which you can scan to get into Slido if you haven't seen the link already, and it's also being posted now in the chat bar. So if you haven't already posted a question that you'd like to ask us, please do so. Feel free to do that via that Slido link. And the other thing you can do if you don't have a question yourself is you can vote for other questions. And it's really important to note that we are ordering the questions that we're answering today based on what you want to hear. So if you vote for a question, the ones right up top will be the ones that we answer first. So please do vote on the ones you'd most like an answer to from us. The other thing to note is we have noticed in some of the questions that were sent in previously that even though they might not be voted right up the top, they might be a really important topic that we know a lot of people on the call would like to hear about. So once in a while, in addition to dealing with questions that are voted up top, we might also bring in a few other themes that we think are important for people attending to hear about. We've received, certainly when I last looked, around 172 questions, but I'm sure there's even more now. Please don't include your personal information. We want to keep that as safe as possible. And now we're going to get started. We will keep our introductions short. I'm going to introduce all the people you'll be hearing from today in the Infected Blood Compensation Authority, but we will aim to keep that really short because we know what you would most like to get to, I'm sure, is hearing answers to your questions. So I'm going to pass over now to Sir Robert Francis, who is Chair of the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. Over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And asking a barrister to keep everything short is always a challenge, but thank you for trying. It's been a long journey since David Foley, Chief Executive, and I were appointed as interim chair last May. From a blank piece of paper, we now have an organisation that has an operationally independent board. We have started inviting people to make applications, and we have made a good start on making payments. None of that will be considered fast enough by anybody, including ourselves. And our main objective is to get things running faster as soon as we can, but at the same time doing it at a pace which allows us to be accurate, fair, and compassionate. We're often asked about the regulations that have been put in place, the second set quite recently. And of course, our job is to implement the recommendations that the government and, more importantly, Parliament has set. And I know there will be questions about the new regulations. We have them as well. Our job is to implement the regulations that Parliament will, we think, approve, and that's what we intend to do. We are asked about our independence. I can assure you, as I've ensured every meeting I've been to, that I would not remain as chair of this organisation if I did not think we were given the freedom to operate this scheme as we think fit. And in that spirit, I'm going to introduce you to three of our non-executive directors, who I suspect many of you will not have seen or heard of before. Well, two actually, I'm sorry, Paula and Helen. So if I could first of all hand you over to Paula.
Thank you, Sir Robert, and good evening, everybody. And I'm really pleased to be here, principally listening in on this important session. I'm what they call the digital and data non-executive for IBCA, which means I support the team and also assure the work that they're doing on the technology build and to an extent all of the operations. My day job is I run a technology startup. My previous jobs were running the Student Loans Company and the Charity Commission. Thank you, Sir Robert.
Thank you very much. And now Helen. You with us, Helen? Let me try Rob Behrens, who might have joined us. Is he with us? Sorry, well, we may introduce one or other or both those later. One or two of us have been having technical difficulties. So with that pause, I will pass on to David.
Thank you, Sir Robert, and good evening, everybody. It is great to be with you. Thank you for giving us your time this evening. My name is Dave Foley. I am the Interim Chief Executive Officer of the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. I'm really looking forward to the session that we are doing this evening to tell you how we're doing, and also, as Rachel said, to answer as many of your questions as we can. As Sir Robert said, when we started, there was Sir Robert and there was me, and that was it at the start. We've moved lots of things to be able to get to where we are now. We've had to do some very boring and mundane but important things like get people in, find places to sit, have IT in order to be able to deliver things. And we have, taken very important steps in order to be able to learn from some real cases in order to be able to develop our system. Some of you will have seen the latest statistics that we published yesterday. In that release, we showed that we've invited 204 people to start their compensation claim. Of those, 38 of them have had offers of compensation, and those offers total more than £48.2 million. And of those 38 offers, 22 of them have been accepted, and those total more than £25.1 million. So some really important first steps and some great over there. And we'll say a bit more about this over the course of this evening. I'm going to hand over to some of my director colleagues in the team. I'll check first whether Celine has been able to unmute herself. Celine, are you available? Yes, yes, excellent. Celine, next, please. Yeah.
So rather embarrassingly, the Director of Digital, who only just managed to get off mute. So my name is Celine McLaughlin. I think I may have spoken to some of you previously. I'm really pleased to be here this evening and to take any questions through from any of you. If I can also introduce my colleague Cindy.
Thanks, Celine. Hi, everybody. So I'm Cindy Skeldon. I'm Cindy Skeldon, the Director of Operations. So I'm responsible for the Claimant Resolution Centre and the claim managers. So happy to answer any questions relating to processing of compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I think we've done most of our introductions. Robert, I don't know if you wanted to try again with Paula and Rob and Helen.
Is Helen with us? Helen Parker? No.
No
Rob?
worries.
Yeah,
Behrens?
I'm here.
Oh, Rob Behrens. Could I
Hi.
ask you just very briefly to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
So
Tell
I'm
me
Rob
what your
Behrens.
background is.
I'm Rob Behrens. I'm an independent member of the board. These conversations are vital for us to be informed about your views about what you want, what style of interaction you need. We're in listening mode. So thank you for coming. Be frank.
Don't worry, Bob. They will be. Back to you, Rachel.
Lovely, thank you. So let's get into the questions now and hear what you'd like us to answer. We have a live Slido running on screen. Please do continue to add your questions, vote on the questions that matter most to you. It's absolutely vital, exactly as Rob said, that we hear what matters, and that we're answering them where possible. And where we can't answer your questions, we'll take them away and do our best to get an answer for you. So I'm now going to pass over to my colleagues Farida and Emma, who are going to run us through all the questions and pass them to members of this panel as we go. Over to you, Farida and Emma.
Okay, so this first question is a question about interest on compensation. So it's understanding who made the decision not to pay lost interest on delayed compensation. And there's a second comment also as highly voted, which is about what is happening to the financial disparity between the first and last recipient. It's unfair that people lose out on interest on compensation amounts. It's unfair that from April, recipients will have their scheme monies deducted from any payout. That should not happen due to delays. And I'm going to ask David to answer this question.
Thank you, Farida. And yes, this is a question that we have heard a number of times, and people have asked it quite regularly. I think it's worth tracing back to where do we get our powers to make payments, and the power is granted us to make payments through the Victims and Prisoners Act 2024, and the regulations that support that, the Infected Blood Compensation Scheme Regulations 2025. Neither of those grant us the power to add interest to the compensation award. So we've got the power to calculate the compensation award and to pay it, but we do have no power to add on interest in terms of from when they were awarded. We are aiming to make our compensation payments as straightforward and as simple as possible. The part of the scheme design is about putting it into tiers and tariffs to make that possible, to make that rapid, and also the calculations that are involved are designed to be as quick as possible too. At the end of it, when you receive an offer, you get the option to decide how you would like to take that compensation payment. There are three options. You can take them as a lump sum, you can take it as a periodical payment of 5, 10 or 25 years. And you can also choose to retain the support scheme payments that you currently get with those netted off against your future financial award and your care cost award. Those future payments are set out in the scheme that they will index all those future payments to the consumer price index, the CPI. But in terms of interest, depending upon when your claim is paid, there is no power within the Act for IBCA to make interest payments, I'm afraid. Next, Farida.
Thanks, David. I think it'll go over to me to ask the next question. So we have heard this quite a lot. It sort of relates to the compensation scheme design, and it asks, why is there such a huge disparity in compensation between HIV and Hep C? Hep C long-term effects are just as devastating. Those who have been infected with HIV deserve every penny, but the numbers need looking at again for the Hep C community and increasing significantly. I think, and that's increasing significantly. I think that'll be for Sir Robert to answer, if possible.
Well, the simple but not very satisfactory answer for this audience is that the decision as to how to set up the compensation for both these terrible diseases was for the government, both the previous government and this, supported as they were by an independent advisory committee. And we get a lot of questions about this, and I know that there have been lots of questions asked directly in engagement sessions with the Minister as well. The only thing I think it'd be fair for me to point out as someone who was involved in recommending a framework in the first place was that it did seem to me in that capacity that it was possible to differentiate between different experiences for people with hepatitis C in a way which was perhaps not the case with HIV, looking at the evidence of the inquiry. My recommendation was accepted by Sir Brian Langstaff, and the advisory committee did then set about seeking to align the compensation scheme with those recommendations. So that was the process. Whether anyone agrees with that is a matter for them. Questions about it, I'm afraid, have to be directed to the Cabinet Office and the government who made the decision as to what's in the regulations. I think the final point I'd make is that when we get to looking at some of the outcomes for compensation, you may find that the differences are not as great in many cases as you might think.
Thanks. I'll go to you, Farida, sorry.
I'll give the next question. So this is a question for Celine, and it's about the calculator. So we've had several questions about this. So somebody wants to understand the date when the compensation calculator will be available for use for estates. But overall, there's a concern and questions about when the compensation calculator will be released and when we'll be able to use it.
Yep. So the calculator, which covers currently infected and estates, is currently in a private beta. We're doing a really small test just to double check whether or not the amounts that people get when they use it themselves unsupported are the same as when a claim manager uses it in order to calculate their offer, because we've got a slight worry that if it's not clear, if the questions aren't clear enough, people might put the wrong information in, which would mean that they get the wrong answers out. So we're trying to minimise that as much as possible by testing that more thoroughly. We're doing that only for a couple of weeks in order to see some of the numbers that come through from there. And assuming that all of that comes out well, we will then be able to launch it publicly. As soon as that is launched, we will then look to see about expanding it to include for affected claims as well. So we're already doing the work to understand how much work is needed for that and how quickly we can do it. We expect it will be a matter of a small number of weeks rather than months in order to be able to add the affected elements into it as well. And then that will go through the same process where we test it with a small number of people and then get it out, and we'll look to do that as quickly as we possibly can. We are working out whether it will ever be possible to have the calculator work effectively for supplementary claims because of the level of complexity in them. It may not be. So we're doing more work to really understand whether or not that causes more confusion rather than helps by including supplementary in it. And we will look to do that as soon as we have it out for affected claims.
Thanks, Celine. I think this next question is going to be for you as well. So
Sorry,
you might as
well... could I just interrupt, because I now see a large picture of Helen Parker has appeared on screen. Could I just interrupt to introduce her to the audience? Helen, could you just introduce yourself with a couple of words, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Good evening, everyone. Real pleasure to be here. My name's Helen Parker. I'm another of the non-executives on the board. My particular focus is around engagement and communication. I worked for many years at Which, the independent consumer organisation, and now always in my roles, my focus is on making sure that organisations are listening to their users and communities and delivering on their needs. So that's my particular focus on the board.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Helen.
Robert.
That's the question.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Sir Robert. So the next question, it will be for Celine, because it's around can you shed light as to when all infected, deceased estates and alive affected infected are registered with EBS will be paid? We need clear details on how we will be contacted. People are worried that contact details are not up to date and have no clue as to when or how they will be contacted. We've had quite a lot of questions around this. For example, the next question underneath is about when will all living infected on schemes have their core root compensation claim underway, and there's a further one down the line with 37 votes that says, are estates being invited to enroll from March and April? Information on estates has gone completely dark. More explanation is needed. My father paid the ultimate price, as all estates want to know when they'll be able to be listed in the IBCA compensation scheme. So over to you, Celine, if possible.
Thanks, So where we are at the moment is that we are looking to start increasing the number of claims that we are dealing with from the 1st of March or from 1st of April to run that through. Initially, that will still be with those that are registered as infected on a scheme. We will be increasing the numbers moving through, and that will be growing in pace as we get faster at processing and as we bring in more claim managers to work with us. So we will be continuing to do that. We're trying to model it as best we can, but because we've done the small number of cases right now, it's very difficult to be clear how quickly we'll be able to move through cases. We're also finding quite a bit of variation from the simplest cases, which I think, and Cindy can correct me here, we were saying can take as few as 10 days to get from starting the claim to paying them, to some of the more complex ones where we're having to seek evidence and wait for evidence to come back, which are taking months to move through. So we're trying to understand what all of those things are and how we can speed it up. So how can we get evidence quicker? What are the different things that we can do to try and move that through? Everything we do to improve that process will speed up how we do it. For estates, what we will be doing is as soon as so the sequencing announcement that we made earlier this month talked about the next set of cases that we can't currently deal with, that we will be looking to deal with, are those where it's a supplementary claim. And we are doing the work now to start understanding what we need to do to be able to build into our processes, our guidance, our training, our systems to be able to handle supplementary cases. As soon as we have understood what that is and we have that work underway, we will be doing the work on estates as well, to then understand for anyone who had an estates claim registered with one of the schemes, how can we then deal with their claim and bring them into the service to move through. So we're doing all of that in a staggered way to make sure that we keep paying people and increasing the volume of people that we're paying, at the same time as gradually opening it out to more and different types of claims as they come through. I believe there was something in the question as well. Sorry, just remind me of the first question, because it's disappeared off my screen. There was a separate part in that question.
Was it about how they were going to be contacted?
Yes, that was it. Thank you. I shall write down the question next time because I didn't realise it would disappear off screen while I was talking. In terms of contacting, we've been discussing that today, actually, around about how we can make sure that we move that through, because what we have found is that it's taken longer to get in touch with some people where the contact details aren't up to date with the schemes, and how we can then reach them to make sure we move that through. We also know that we've heard from people that they're concerned about if for any reason their name hasn't come through to us from the scheme, and then they're not on the list of people that we're going to be inviting through. So we are exploring potentially writing out to everybody who we have the details for as someone who is infected and registered with a scheme, to let them know that we do have your details. We will be getting in touch with you. We can't say exactly when, but just to give that reassurance of there, and checking that we've got all the right details. So at the point at which we are ready to bring and start off that claim, we know the details there. We're also exploring, because we've heard really strongly about how we put something in place about having some sort of prioritisation for those near end of life, and having a way for people to be able to contact us to let us know that. And we'll be hopefully be able to communicate more on that quite soon as we work that up in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Celine. So I'll take the next question, and I'm going to ask you, Sir Robert. It's about interferon primarily. So why has interferon treatment been completely omitted from any additional financial loss? And another question that goes with that, which is why is there no recognition of the horrific interferon treatment on the core route?
Well, I think that, again, the way in which the scheme has been set up is a matter for the government to answer for. In this respect, I think it has followed precisely the recommendations of the advisory committee, which has the clinicians of which have taken a view about interferon treatment and where it should fit into the scheme. I'm going to ask David whether he wants to add anything about the detail of how it might be taken into account in respect of the equivalent of the special category mechanism, because he may be able to answer that better than me.
Thank you, Sir Robert. I haven't got much to add to that, unless we've got anything from Hannah, and I'll check to see if we have or not. I think perhaps we go to the next question, see if we can bring any more back on that one.
Okay.
Thanks, David. We can come back to that one. If that's okay, we'll come back to that one. Next question is around claim managers. So it'll be this one will be for Cindy. We've had quite a few questions around claim managers. This one's around only 20 claim managers have been hired so far, although 500 claim manager jobs have been advertised. It has now been announced that only 50 will be hired each month. At this rate, it will tend take 10 months to reach capacity. Does this mean that claims will unnecessarily be delayed and take years to process? I think we've another question was around how many claim managers are currently employed, which I think this question answers that one for us. And another one asks, can IBCA gives us figures on how many case managers will be working come the new financial year at the start of April?
Okay, so if you...
There's something wrong with the mic.
Okay, sorry for the echo there. So a couple of questions there. So we have 30 claim managers at the minute. So 20 who are assigned to be claim managers and 10 of those who actually work as claimant resolution managers on the Claimant Support and Resolution Centre. So what that means is they answer the emails and the phone calls, but altogether they've all had the same training, so that if we are quiet on emails and on phone calls, they can pick up claims as well. So there's 30 at the moment. We have been recruiting heavily. We had 3,500 applications for the potential 500 vacancies that we have. And we will start onboarding from the end of March. So another 40 to 50 will join us at the end of March. So to answer the other question, come the beginning of April, we should have about 70 claim managers employed. And as it says there, we will be bringing on people every month. Now, when we've said 500, that is a massive estimate, because what we don't know is how long claims will actually take to process and how many claims a claim manager can deal with at any one time. So at the minute, they're dealing with about 10 each. And as Celine said as well, some of those, one of those took 10 days to process. On average, it takes 39 days to process and work that way through. So as we test and learn, we will work out what the capacity is for the claim managers, but also how long it takes. So the 500 is based on a certain set of hours that we think it will take. As we learn more, we will know more about how many actual claim managers we need to get through the process. But at the minute, that's the plan, to keep on board. And we can only onboard so many per month because we only have so much capacity to bring in new people to upskill them and learn with the number of claim managers that we currently have, Emma. I think that answered all of your questions.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You.
Okay, I have a question now on SCM, so on the special category measures. I will, not sure who on ExCo would like to take this question. I will pose it to Sir Robert and David, and then others can chime in if they would like to. So it's the SCM criteria disregard long-term mental health issues unless the individual has been hospitalised. This excludes those on antidepressants for years but managing outside inpatient care. Given the lasting impact, how is this justified? And there are other questions around SCM, and they're all about trying to understand why, given certain conditions, SCM hasn't been taken forward in the way that the questioners would have liked.
Can I sort of have a go at the bit about mental health issues? Because I think it's clear that the compensation for injury, the impact of injury includes the suffering caused by mental health issues. And one of the issues around a compensation scheme is that it seeks to provide a figure which is generally fair to the people who have suffered from this scandal without providing a bespoke award for each individual. And therefore, it is bound to look at common experiences. And I think the advisory committee that set up the scheme will have looked at the mental health consequences, both of the diseases themselves, but also, going back to the last question, to the effect of treatment. And different people will have suffered in different ways, but in effect, and this may sound, it's not meant to be callous in any way, but the level of suffering involved can be arrived at in different ways from different people. Some people it will maybe a mental health issues, other it may be physical. And I think that's always going to be very difficult to quantify into a tariff scheme. But the answer produced by the government is the one you have in front of you. With regard to the SCM, I again refer back to David.
Thank you, Sir Robert. And I think connecting the two questions, the government has said that in their scheme they have considered the side effects of treatments such as interferon and conditions such as chronic fatigue, and they've seen that as part of their universal approach, in particular with to applicants with a hepatitis infection. There is of course the severe health condition, which is included within the scheme, and this provides more financial support for infected people who have suffered from specified rare severe health conditions as a result of their infection, or indeed as a result of the treatment for that infection, which may not always have been taken into account in the core awards. So this does, for example, include impacts for severe psychiatric disorders resulting in long-term mental health disability, or autoimmune diseases caused or exacerbated by interferon treatment. There is a list that's published on the government website of the health conditions that they have scheduled as eligible. I wonder if we can perhaps publish that in some way. I don't know if we can put that in the chat at some point for Rita or Em. That might be helpful for people. We can certainly send it out afterwards as well. But in that government publication, they list all the eligible health conditions that are provided in the Severe Health Condition Award.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, David. We've got the chat and the Q&A functions disabled at the moment, but we will try and put that link up at the end of the session, if that's okay. The next question is around tariffs. It was around tariffs, but I think, sorry, it's disappeared from my screen. So I'll go on to the next one and maybe we can get that other question back up, if that's okay. This question is around why isn't the financial package? There we go, there it's back. Thank you very much. It's around tariffs again. Sorry, David, this probably be coming to you. Why don't haemophiliacs have a separate tariff as they repeatedly knowingly give infected factor VIII, which was pulled from high-risk donors and larger pools?
Thanks, Em. I think the answer to this is in the approach that the government took to devise the scheme. They obviously took the recommendations of reports that have been published previously. They had their expert advisory group that advised them, and they aimed for a scheme that would, in the tiers and tariffs that it had, would aim to pay the best possible compensation to most people as quickly as possible. And in doing that, they ended up in a result we're looking at specifically about the diseases that were contracted and their severity as a structure for those tiers and those tariffs. So I don't know for sure whether this particular issue was directly considered, but that was the approach they took when arriving at the tiers and the tariffs that they did include.
Could I perhaps just add to that this scheme is designed to compensate people who have suffered injury as a result of receiving infected blood or blood products. The issue of whether someone, regardless of injury, should receive an award because they were, without being warned of risks, received a risk of getting an infection, but you didn't get one, would have been covered by the debate that took place about whether there should have been a compensation for the gross misconduct, if that's what one considers it to be, as described in this question. And the answer to that, by both the inquiry, I think, and the government, has been no. So the compensation scheme it is about the impact of being infected as a result of these failures, rather than separately for the failure itself.
Thank you, Sir Robert. So I will go on to the next question, which is Why isn't the financial package paid from infection? Many haemophiliacs were infected as children on numerous occasions, thus making their childhood years extremely hard. And I will put that to, well, I'm sorry, David.
Sure.
Robert.
Yeah, Farida, shall I start?
Yes.
Yeah, happy to start, Farida. Thank you. So there's 5 heads of loss in the scheme, and one is about financial loss, and this is to recognise the effect that disease had on preventing people from earning a living, and the scheme assumes that there is a starting point at which it was likely that people might have earned, and it puts that point at 16, the age of 16, and there's a point at which people would have stopped earnings and moved into retirement, and it puts that at retirement age. So those are the start and the finish years from which it calculates financial loss for earnings, and then post-retirement age it calculates financial loss as in a reduced amount that people could have expected to receive post the retirement age. So that's the rationale for the choice of the age of 16 at the start of financial loss. It doesn't recognize. It doesn't try to say about effects. Though the physical effects happen in a different head of loss, but for the financial loss, 16 is the age at which the scheme starts to calculate.
Thank you, David. We'll move on to the next one. The next one's around the calculator, and I think Celine has taken several questions on that, so we'll move on if that's okay. And the next one, again, is about regarding special category mechanism. We were told on the 24th of August by the government that we would not have to provide any additional information. So why has this been changed? And why are those currently on SCM having to prove this once again? We all believed we would be eligible for higher payments due. I'll look to David again. Sorry, I think that might be for you or for Celine.
So so what is in the regulations obviously is a matter for the government, and so I don't know if you understand the reason why they've drafted the regulations in the way they have. If you have, please do come in. Otherwise, we'd be very happy to take that back. Selena, if you're happy.
So I don't understand the rationale behind why the regulations have been drafted in the way that they have, but in terms of the evidence requirements, while we won't be able to just kind of infer the eligibility because of having received something previously, if the scheme already had the evidence in order to assess the SCM previously and has passed that information to us, we will be able to use that evidence through. So we can't just assume eligibility and take that over because of the way the regs have been drafted, but we can use any evidence that's already been provided to the schemes to assess against the new way that the measures are drafted within the regulations for the compensation.
Thank you both.
Thank you. So question here is, we really need a solid time frame here. None of us are able to plan ahead in our lives without understanding when you are inviting each cohort to enrol in the scheme. I urge you to publish a timeline and be transparent instead of asking for constant input and delaying everything. I'm sorry, Celine, I think that probably one is for you as well.
Yes, I think it is. And I think that the two that come after as well are all sort of related to the timeframe question. So we understand that people want as much certainty as we can give on timeframes. And since the sequencing has been agreed, we're looking to see how we can work out when we think we might be starting to take claims in from different types of claims than we're currently handling at the moment. It's very difficult to give exact timeframes on when or how many claims we'll be able to pay through because, as I say, the complexity and the differential of the different claims that are coming through, we haven't yet got enough information to be able to say this is how long that will take and model that out. we are building the model and we are constantly refining it, the more claims that we process to be able to understand what that looks like and start to get a little bit more certainty. But obviously that means that we've got certainty now on how long it takes us to work through a claim for someone who's registered as infected with a scheme. Every time we start to take new types of claims through, we'll have to understand that better and build that through. So we will hopefully be able to give more idea of when we think we will start taking new types of claims. As we've been doing more and more claims coming through, we'll get a better idea of what the average time it takes to move that through, which will give a bit more of an idea of when we will get through numbers of where we understand the size of the number of claims we've got to do. But it's quite difficult to give anything more specific. We do understand that people want to be able to plan around it, and we're trying to think about what we can give as best we can about forward-looking information, while remaining clear that may well change as things around us change and we move through it. Specifically on the next one around about estates, I think I answered that before. So we're looking at supplementary next, then we'll be looking through at all of the estates that have been registered with schemes, starting with a small number as we have with the current group. And I think then the next one is, I think I've answered that one through. In terms of we're trying to still understand how long it takes to go straight through them to be able to get better information of how long it'll take us to ramp up with the greater numbers and volumes.
That's great. Thanks, Lee. I think we've covered those three questions. With regards to the next question, I'm going to come to Sir Robert on that. It's around unethical research, and we have had a number of questions on unethical research. So I'll read out this one and a couple of the others, if that's okay. So we've got, why aren't all haemophiliacs getting the 10,500 research money? Why is it only some centres? Small centres or under bigger umbrellas of those at fault. And we've also got, there was extensive research conducted in many of the haemophilia centres, and there were delays in providing information about infected status. Unethical behaviour was common. Will this be reflected in compensation for relevant claims, and will amounts reflect the trauma experienced by families? And there's another one here as well about who came up with the figure of 10,500 for those under research. Yeah, if I could hand to Sir Robert for that, if that's okay.
Well, all I can say is the process by which the list of people who were entitled to get money for unethical research was firstly a list of those centres that the inquiry found had been undertaking this sort of research, and therefore the patients who'd been treated by then all the relevant doctors named. This government decided to undertake a further consultation on that subject, and I know the Minister personally talked about this with representative groups, and the result was the list of names, groups as it were, that appear in the regulations. So that's how it came about. The amount involved is an amount intended, again, it's an amount approved by the government via the advisory committee report, I think. And I emphasise, and I think I have at every one of the sessions I've had meeting groups, that this is a symbolic amount of money to acknowledge that someone was subjected to research without their knowledge or their consent. It is not intended to compensate for any injury from the resulting infection. That is covered by all the other heads. So there is no, this is purely to compensate for the breach of someone's human right not to be experimented on. And regardless of whether they suffered a serious injury or a less serious injury, that's catered for in other heads of damage. So no amount would be the right amount to pay for this. And the amount come up with is this.
Thank you, Sir Robert. The next question Very. We were told no one would be worse off if you decide to take some. The yearly monies get. We were told no one would be worse off. If you decide to take a lump sum, the yearly monies get reduced by almost 2/3 for those on SCM. When the guidelines first came out, this was not the case. Who would like to take this? David or Sir Robert?
Rita, shall I? I'll have a go at this one. I'm not entirely sure at the question proposition, but if I can talk you through what happens when an offer is made, that might illuminate what the point that's trying to be got at here. So the when the offer is made, there are three options in terms of how you can take the compensation. You can take it as a lump sum, or you can take it as a periodical payment over 5, 10 or 25 years, or you can choose to retain your existing support scheme payments as you've got them on the SCM, which net off your future financial loss, the financial loss award a part of the compensation, and your future care costs part of the compensation scheme as well, and receive the rest as a lump sum. When that calculation is done, because there's a different way of calculating the support scheme payments and the compensation payments, you could be better off by having retained the support scheme payments. That is fine. The government will not net that off, so you are able to retain that advantage. You could be worse off, and the government has agreed that it will top up any difference between those if that is the case. So there is a difference if you choose to take the support scheme payments, and the government has agreed that it will always give you the best of the two offers there. So that could be, I think, what this question is asking about, is why on some retention of the support scheme payments you will get more than the compensation payment. It's not a reduction to the compensation payment, it's that you could end up having more by retaining the support scheme payments. Obviously, every case is individual, and you will need to consider the offer when you receive it. Thanks, Rita.
Thanks, David. The next two questions are around data and evidence. So I'll probably come to Celine for these two questions. We've got please provide substantive detail on why such a high proportion of claims from existing support scheme members require additional evidence. I can't understand why. Surely these cases are already established. This must be incredibly upsetting and also avoidably slow and expensive to administer. The next one is, please explain the issues you're having. Most details for the affected are cast in stone. EBS, date of birth, date of infection, bank details. In fact, the only items seem to be severity and care awards. Could this be done in a sandbox many times over? Why the delay?
I'll start, and then I'll bring in Cindy as well, in terms of the real feedback from our claim managers. So unfortunately, EBS don't hold all of the information. So date of infection is not something that's commonly held by a lot of the schemes, as an example, because it wasn't necessary for them when they were calculating at their side, which makes, and so while there is a lot of evidence that's been provided to the existing schemes in order to assess eligibility and to register people on those, the way that the regulations have been written and the things that we need to assess and establish in order to decide on the amount of the compensation means that there is sometimes evidence that was not required by the schemes that is required by us. Oftentimes, date of infection is an obvious one that comes up quite frequently, but there have been other things where we've had to write out to clinicians, and that's one of the things that's holding us up in terms of moving that through, because obviously they have a lot of requests coming through and they're trying to manage that across. Cindy, I don't know if there's more that you want to add from things that the claim managers have been telling you.
Yeah, thanks, Celine. That's the key one, really, is they're not, We'll get about 40% where we've got all of the information that we actually need. And it's a data severity already, severity changes where we're finding we need to go out to clinicians to seek that further information. And they are the cases that more or less take the longest time as well. There is one thing that I would like to say whilst we've got the opportunity, and that is you do not need your full medical records. I do know that there's some advice out there at the minute asking people to go and get that, but you don't need all of your medical records. And actually what that could do is hold the system up as well for when we come to the clinicians for the information that we do actually need. So we will seek that information on your behalf, but that's the main reason is the clinicians on severity changes. Thanks, Celine.
Thanks both.
Thank you. So to the next question. What will estates need to make their claim, and what we would be expecting from children to make a claim when the time comes? Can either group start to pre-register to speed along this process? And I'm going to ask you, Celine.
Yeah, so we haven't started the work in detail yet on what is needed in terms of estates, and we think that will be different, obviously, for those where there's an estate claim that's already been registered with the scheme and the scheme already holds a lot of information, or where we've got people who haven't been registered with the scheme making an estate claim. So we will see different needs coming through as we do both of them. So as soon as we know more and we start the discovery and work on that to be very clear about what's needed, we'll come back out. We know that a lot of people have received an interim compensation payment in relation to estates, and we're getting a lot of learning from that because we know that there were a number of issues in terms of how that was applied and worked through, and we need to make sure that we learn from that so we can make that as straightforward as possible for people when it comes to us making those payments. We don't currently have any pre-registration process set up. For those where the claims are already registered with an existing scheme, which is the case for the first two groups that we're looking at in terms of those registered as infected or those registered with estates, we already have people's information to move that through, and we're working through how we can do that. Whether we need pre-registration for some of the later groups as we start to expand out is something that we're actively exploring, whether or not we want, it would be helpful to introduce that when we get to those stages.
Thank you. I think we've answered the next question because it was around how many claims managers have we have, and I think Cindy said that was 30 at the moment. The next one is it's please confirm that all IBS registered alive and deceased estates can be contacted to enrol from April the 1st. So I think it's about it's about the timelines, Celine. And could you also confirm that multiple infections will be taking a priority?
So all of the, I suppose I've talked a couple of times now that we will continue with those who are registered as infected on a scheme, and then we will be moving to those that are registered with an estate claim on a scheme in terms of moving that through, and we'll be doing it in that order. We will be, as I said, we're exploring contacting people who are registered as infected on a scheme to confirm that we have their details, and that we will be contacting them as soon as we can to start their claim through. In terms of the priority, the main area that we're focusing on at the moment in terms of prioritising claims is those where someone is near end of life, because that is the one area that's come across consistently and strongly in all of the different conversations that we've had to date. We will also look at whether or not there are other areas that we could prioritise through. But what we've found to date is that we get quite differing views on where we should prioritise different types of claims, and that there's no kind of straightforward response on that. So we will continue to look at that, and we'll continue to update as we make any decisions on how to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question then covers inheritance tax. Parents of children, and I'm going to come to David for this one, parents of children who died as a result of receiving contaminated factor VIII are now in their late 70s, 80s and 90s. When these elderly parents unfortunately pass away, a family is going to be hit with a massive inheritance tax bill, having to give back 40% of their compensation. This can't be right.
Thank you, Farida. So the Act and the regulations do make scope for state very clearly about how inheritance tax will apply to these payments. So when the payment is made to the estate, that will not be subject to inheritance tax. That will be exempt from it. The compensation will be relieved from it whilst it's part of the person who dies estate. However, and as this question suggests, if the beneficiary of the estate dies, the compensation is added to their estate, and at this point, then the inheritance tax relief does not carry forward. So it is exempt when it's paid to the estate, but when the recipient of that then dies, I'm afraid the inheritance tax relief does not carry forward from there. So that's as set out in the Act and its regulations. So yeah.
David, I think I'm right in saying, although you could confirm this, that whatever that parents would have received as affected persons, which of course we're just beginning to develop now, that would be a pass inheritance tax free from their estate. Or is that not the case?
Could we clarify that, Robert? I'd like to take the word. Yeah.
But well, yeah, I'm not certain, so no one else is going to be either. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, let's check.
Thank you. The next question is around staff. So I'll come to Cindy for this one. How many of your staff have read the final report from the public inquiry?
Thanks, So the final report is obviously quite large, in fact, very large. So we do encourage everybody, and that's not just claim managers, but it's all of the leadership in all of the different teams across data and everywhere else, to read the report, to read the recommendations, to read the legislation, and indeed our training supports translating that into guidance as well. One thing that we do though is we try to bring the report to life a little bit. So we do invite members of the community in to talk to our claim managers. So we've had people from homosexual, tainted blood, others that have come in and actually spoke directly to our claim manager, so they get that real feel of what it was like and sort of firsthand by asking some questions from that. So that sort of brings the report to life a bit as well. So I don't know the numbers, but we are all encouraged to read it. Thanks, Em.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question about unethical research, and I will come to Sir Robert for this one. In determining the list of haemophilia centres that undertook unethical research, the expert group reviewed the final report. Evidence from hospitals or clinicians was not considered. If their evidence is found to demonstrate testing at other centres, then what is the process to have this recognised?
Well, firstly, as I've already said, there was consultation following the expert group's report, which has resulted in the longer list that you will see annexed to the regulations. The answer to the actual question though is one you'll have to ask the government. We've got a draft regulations which are due to go before Parliament, I think later in next month, and it would require those to be amended in some shape or form should further evidence come to light.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is regarding compensation awards of individuals that were infected as children. And I think I'll come to David, if I may, for that one. Will IBCA consider compensating individuals infected pre-16 for the impact of their childhood education and development, affecting their potential career and ability to claim loss of earnings?
Thank you, Em. So we have to abide by what are set out in the regulations. the regulations, as we said earlier on, in terms of financial loss, begin from the age of 16, they don't allow for calculations of loss before the age of 16. I think this question is also asking about the what if I was, en route to a particular career, and as a result of the damage I suffered, unable to pursue it. The core award calculates financial loss at the rate of the median national earnings. If you thought that you would have earned more than that, then the supplementary route opens the opportunity to evidence that, but it does require evidence as set out in the regulations at the moment, and that could be very difficult for people who weren't able to enter a career. So I think there's those are things people need to take into account when thinking about this question. There aren't any financial loss for pre-16, and in the regulations as drafted, in order to prove that you were in a career that would have seen you earn more than the median national earnings, it requires you to evidence that you were receiving those earnings in that career, which I think might be a difficult situation for those pre-16 who suffered the impact then, and therefore their education wasn't able to proceed. So I think there's a very important point in the regulations that I think this question is driving at.
Thank you. So I'm going to come to you again for this one, David, as well. So somebody has said, I was left infertile due to treatment for hepatitis C, yet this life-changing permanent impact is not recognised under SCM because it is not listed. How is this fair?
I mean, that obviously is a terrible consequence to suffer. So it's terrible to hear that. I think the scheme, and obviously it was for the government to set out what was in the scheme. I think the scheme took its advice from its independent expert advisory panel to draw up both the general tariffs and what they would consider, and also those specifically listed under SCM. It's for the government to explain why it chose which and why they put it in that way, and obviously we will have to implement it in the way that are set out in the regulations. But that does sound a terrible consequence of being infected. So it's a terrible burden to carry.
Thank you, David. I think the next question is again around children before the age of 16, and I think it probably relates to the last question that you actually answered of why is harm done to children before the age of 16 disregarded. I think if you're happy, I think we've obviously answered that question, so I'll move on to the next one, unless you have anything else to add. David? No.
I don't think there's anything further on this area.
Okay,
yeah,
that's great. Thank you. This one again is, I think it's more around timelines and timeframes and a timeline. So I think this might have been answered before, but I think it's important that we just read this one out. The delays have a drastic negative effect on my husband's mental health. The stress of reliving this tragedy has been horrific and is getting worse every day, to the extent that yesterday his vision was impaired for a number of hours due to the stress. We need to speed up it to end this additional suffering.
David. I'll take that one as well. So like that. So everybody who's due compensation has waited an incredible amount of time for this, and totally recognise that it needs to be paid as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. We do think that the approach we're taking is the fastest way to get everybody paid. The alternatives of, and we've seen from the questions that we've had posed already today about the, everybody's circumstance is different. There are some very complicated and complex situations in which people are in, and the alternative is to, build a service which we make you fit to the service so that we can open the service as quickly as possible. But actually, a much better way, we think, is to build the service based around real people and really understanding the circumstances that enable us to pay that quickly, and then we'll be able to pay it much more rapidly, and that means that we will get to a conclusion for everybody much more quickly. But we're straining every sinew to try and pay people as quickly as possible. We do think this is the best way to do that, and we will do everything in our power to do this as quickly as we can for everybody, and as soon as possible.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. We've talked about timelines already, but I think because it's coming up quite a few times, I think it's worth just posing this question again. So I will bring this one to you, Celine. It's, can you confirm that from April the 1st, you will be opening up the scheme completely to all of phase 1 / registered EVES, infected estates and infected alive? Can you also confirm if co-infected HIV / Hep C are prioritised?
So just to confirm, so from April, we will be taking higher volumes of claims for the current group that we're already taking claims from. So that will be for those who are registered, infected and living with a scheme. We have not yet decided whether or not there will be any prioritisation of those claims beyond looking at an end of life prioritisation route, which we're currently exploring and getting the right level of detail for. We will be then increasing out into other groups, starting first with supplementary and working through those, then taking claims for those who are registered with an estate claim with an existing scheme.
Thank you.
Thanks, Celine. I think on the back of that, I might come in on this question, if that's okay. This will be for you, Celine. I think this is more about the 250 people that have already been, or that are being invited to claim before by the end of March. And it was just, have you already chosen the names of who will be contacted by the end of the March, so we can stop constantly having to check or get anxious about potential contact?
I'll let Cindy confirm when the last batch of invites are due to be sent out, but we're very close to having sent all of the invitations out now for those claims that we're anticipating to try and pay before the end of March.
Yeah, thanks, Celine. So as David said at the beginning, we've issued 204 already. So the last 46 will either be going out tomorrow or Monday. Interestingly, about half people that were contacted get it by correspondence rather than by email. So please check your spam folders, and please make sure that your support schemes have got your most up-to-date details, so that we can make sure that we have your correct and current details as well. So tomorrow, Monday latest.
Thanks, Cindy. If I can just add as well that we're exploring, because we have heard about the anxiousness of people waiting to see when an invitation is going to come through. So we're looking to see about how we can minimise that as we start to go into higher numbers as well. So whether or not we can do something about giving some idea of when we expect to get to different people within the registered infected group. To try and give some indication, but obviously recognising that might move and shift. So it's trying to get the right balance of giving some detail through as we get better with that modelling, as I talked about earlier.
Thank you.
Apologies, slight tech issues. So this question is for Rachel Forster. What have the 3 community representatives you employed been doing?
Thanks, Farida. So for those who aren't aware, we appointed 3 user consultants, and they were from the infected blood community. That means those 3 people were eligible to apply under the compensation scheme to help us design our internal plans and processes, which basically means that we want to ensure they are telling us wherever we can build in community voices, community feedback, so that that's always taken into account. Now, I should say at this point, those 3 people can't and actually shouldn't represent every community member. They're not here to represent you directly, because we need to hear from you directly. And that's why we speak with many community groups and members every week. So today's session is an example of that. We need to hear your views and concerns direct. But the user consultants are absolutely to hear on a day-to-day basis. So every single day, day in, day out, to help us understand how our decisions internally might impact on you in the community. So whenever we are working through a new way of how we might contact you, for example, our communications, or how we might find your data and understand your data, and making sure that you always are asked and that we have the right processes, so that no one feels that we're doing something we haven't got permission for, or perhaps doesn't feel fully involved. All of those day-to-day internal processes we need advice on. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing on your behalf and supporting you where possible. So that might be, as I've mentioned, communications and how we speak and how we reach you through different channels. It might be understanding some of the inquiry findings and building that into how we operate on a day-to-day basis. It might, going back to the data example, be saying to them, we're not quite sure where to get this information on a particular group of people. You know, with experience, do you know where that might be? Will it be via the inquiry, or will it be via health providers, etc.? There are so many examples where we can benefit from the views of yourselves in the community and our user consultants to really understand, first of all, how we can do things best, and secondly, the impact on you. Now, I will reiterate again, it's not for those 3 people to give us advice on that and it stops there. We absolutely need to get advice on that from many of you in the regular engagement sessions that we run. But we're very conscious that we can't be contacting you every single day, every single week, to keep asking these questions all the time. So having people there who are immediately available to us to help us understand that is incredibly helpful.
Could I just add, from the point of view of the board, that I know that I and my non-executive colleagues have found the involvement of the community advisors extremely informative. I think it was probably my idea to have community advisors, and I intended that they should be informative, but also part of the conscience of the organisation. And I think the 3 we have fulfilled both those roles admirably.
Thanks, both. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Sir Robert. The next question again is about interferon and about treatment. And I think, as per the questions already asked and answered earlier by David, that interferon is already built into the core award. So I'll probably move over to that one. And if we can go to the next question, it says, and I'll probably direct this one because it's around voices not being drowned out. So I'll come to Rachel for this one, if that's okay. And it's around, given the affected far outnumber the infected, how will you ensure that our voice is not drowned out?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you to whoever asked this. It's so important, back to my previous answer, that we hear all those voices, and we know that speaking to a range of community groups can help, but it's not the full answer. So any community groups that have identified themselves with us at IBCA, at the moment, I think there's 32 groups that have come to us and say we represent some members of the community. We ensure that we're speaking to those groups on a regular basis, as long as they're happy to do so, of course. And we make sure that we're keeping them updated. So where we send perhaps latest statistics on how many people we're paying and what kind of compensation amounts are going out, or where we need advice again on how best our communications can reach as many people as possible, we will very regularly be going to those groups and asking for their help. And thank you for anyone who's on this call from those groups, because we've found only willingness to come and help us do that, which is hugely valued. But as I say, that isn't the full answer. We know that many may not be represented by those community groups, and doing these kind of events, we hope, will allow us to hear more voices. And that doesn't limit you to, if you're an infected person, if you're an affected person. We hope that all of these sessions will allow people to come forward and make sure their voices are heard. But again, we know that there's so much more to do. You know, we're only at the start of that journey, and we have communications plans, certainly from my point of view, but in other areas like Cindy's, where there's claim managers talking to people day to day, we have a lot of plans to make sure that we make that outreach even more wide and effective, and we'd be very willing to hear any other ideas on that. A good example will be when we get to the point of opening up claims to larger numbers. We would really value hearing your views on, you know, who in your networks, whether it be within your family or within wider groups, should we be talking to? What do they want to hear? What are they worried about? So please keep talking to us. Please keep flagging your ideas, because I'm sure there's much more we could do to help here. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to go to a question for Sir Robert, and this is just about, the question is, there were doctors who should have been prosecuted for manslaughter or gross negligence manslaughter, and doctors who tested their patients for HIV without consent and did not inform them about their infections. Shouldn't the categorisation for unethical research be broader in government documents? And again, this is for Sir Robert.
I'm afraid I think that, I mean, it's a very good question. I think it's one that should be put to the government. All I would say is that this is, the compensation scheme is designed to give compensation for the impact of the wrong done to people by being given an infected product. It is not about the punishment or accountability or otherwise of those who were responsible for that. The impact, both social through autonomy and through unethical research, is all recognised in different ways. Whether you agree with the way it's recognised or not is another issue in the compensation scheme. So we're talking here about the invasion of people's rights, the impact on them, and what injury it's actually caused to people. So I think that the outcome of conduct of the type described, if that be what happened, and I think I need to be cautious there, it is reflected in different ways under the different categories of compensation. But as I say, whether anyone thinks that's sufficient is a matter of opinion to be addressed to the government, not to us.
Thank you. I know that we're conscious we are slowly running out of time, so we have quite a lot of questions to get through. So I'll go with the top one for now. We might want to pick some subjects that might not have been covered as we go further down. You are calculating awards from the date of infection to healthy life expectancy. Can you clarify what healthy life expectancy currently is for males and females? I'm going to go to David for that question.
Thank you. The regulation sets out where we take healthy life expectancy from. They're taken from what's called the Ogden tables. And these are a well-used set of tables and a statistical method used to calculate compensation for personal injury and also fatal accidents in the UK. So it's as set out in the Ogden tables is where we take the healthy life expectancy from.
That's great.
Which are available online if you know where to look for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, it's gone. Sorry.
Farida, it was about if we would supply confirmation of compensation payments so people can use it for mortgage payments and what have you. So I can answer that, and the answer is yes, absolutely, we can and we will. So when you get your decision notification, it gives you details there of your amount, and if you've chosen to take support payments for life, it tells you what that annual payment is, and of course it will be uplifted every year as well. If anything more than that is needed, because I know the current support schemes provide something, then we would be more than happy to oblige and provide something that will support somebody. Thanks, Farida.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to a question that probably hasn't been asked before. I'm going to have to go. We'll go to Rachel for this one, and it was about what has your PR firm done?
No problem. Thanks, Em, and very happy to answer that one. So let me give a little bit of context first, which might be helpful. So we're appointing and working with a number of agencies, and those contracts are likely spanning a number of years. So they aren't in the short term, they are looking at the next few years. And there's a couple of benefits to that. This work, first of all, helps us to concentrate in my team, which is the IBCA Comms and Engagement team, on the here and now needs of yourselves within the community. So that might be things like these type of webinars, engagement sessions, community updates, social media content that allows us to keep updating you really regularly. And you may have noticed if you're signed up to those updates, if not, please go to our website, because that's the best place to find out the latest news, that they're pretty regular, because as Celine and others have described, we are changing and developing the service as we go, and really upping our numbers as quickly as we can in terms of people who are receiving and applying for compensation. So being able to give that here and now update, we know, is hugely important. You need to see progress. You need to see that we are absolutely committed to making sure that payments are going out the door as quickly as possible. Now, that's very important, but we also need to plan for future work, and that's where agencies come in. So our agencies allow us, while we do the here and now work, to plan for things like reaching each and every person who's eligible for compensation. So for example, at some point in the future, it might be a year, it might be even longer, we'll see when that need arises, but we will need to run a paid for campaign. That's an advertising campaign where once all of you who know you're eligible, have applied, have received your compensation, we know that there are many more out there who either don't feel ready to apply, don't feel confident to apply, don't even know they're eligible in the first place, some who haven't even been diagnosed yet. And there's a lot of work there to be done in that space to reach those people. We also know that there's audiences who might not have English as their first language, they might be in hard to reach communities. Now, all of those people are absolutely just as eligible for compensation as anyone else, and we need to make sure we reach them. So working with those agencies, that allows us to plan ahead, to find where those audiences are that perhaps we aren't able to reach immediately ourselves. But I should really caveat with the fact that we won't be doing a lot of this work straight away, because we know what really matters to you right now is getting the money out the door for those who absolutely know they're eligible, have in some cases been waiting decades for this money, and we need to concentrate on doing that first. So please be reassured, this isn't taking us away from that immediate priority. It just allows us to, working with agencies, plan ahead so that when we do get to that point, our audiences can feel that we are reaching out to each and every one, and making sure that every single person who's eligible is able to and feels supported to. I think that might bring us almost to time, unless you think we can squeeze one more in.
I was just having a look, because there is one about medical notes, and if we will publish, I think we've heard this several times in other webinars, around publishing guidance about what evidence people can start gathering, if they can start gathering. And don't know whether Celine or yourself wanted to take that one.
I think we absolutely will start trying to give information out about what we're finding, or the types of evidence that we're missing that we're having to go and get. We're trying to strike a really careful balance here, though. So we know that people will be going to many of the same places in order to get some of those bits of evidence. And if we have people whose claims we're not, so if you already have the evidence, and that's brilliant, we've got it, we can use it, and we can move that through. But what we don't want is for people to start reaching out to clinicians to start asking for evidence to get ready in advance, because what that may mean is that those people whose claims we are processing at the moment can't get the information from their clinicians because they get overloaded with requests coming through. So it's a really tricky balance that we're trying to strike in terms of how we do that. So we will keep talking about what the bits of evidence are that we don't have, asking people who have it to hold onto it. We will definitely take into account anything that people already have to move that through.
Thank you. Rachel, I don't know whether, I think we've only got 3 minutes left, so we might want to summarise and close and talk about next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Emma, and thank you to all of you who submitted your questions. Before I wrap up with some final information on how we're going to share this, etc. Sir Robert and David, is there anything you would like to add?
David, you go first.
Thank you, Sir Robert. Thank you to everybody who has participated, and thank you for the numerous and wide-ranging questions, which I think show both the need for people to be paid compensation and to be paid compensation as quickly as possible, and also illustrate the complexity and of both the regulations and the sets of circumstances that people find themselves in. We will continue to, first of all, ensure that we tell you first of any developments and make sure you're aware of that. We will continue to work diligently and hard at progressing the development of the scheme as we've set out in our recent communications. And we will continue to make sure that our approach of supporting people in getting the right compensation is the mantra of everybody who works in IPCA. So thank you very much for your time tonight. It's really appreciated, and we will do more of these to make sure that we keep everybody in loop and get the relevant questions so that we can help to answer where people are. Thank you. Over to you, Sir Robert.
Thank you, David, and thank you to everyone who's participated here, and my apologies to the many of you whose particular question has not been answered. But we will go through those and see what we can do about answering them collectively. Engagement of this sort is enormously important to us, and I particularly fully appreciate that for many years your community has not been listened to in the way that it should have been. We're determined that in the way we deliver the scheme, we do listen to your many very understandable concerns, so we will continue engaging in this way. And I can assure you that everyone on our board, everyone who works in this organisation, wants to get the money out of the door to the right people in the right quantity as soon as possible. But now that you have seen, or will have seen, the full extent of the regulations that have been necessary to get the whole scheme, to empower the whole scheme, I hope you will understand how complicated and challenging that is. For each individual, it may seem simple. Collectively, this is a big logistical challenge. And I can assure you that we are doing our best to make sure that we produce an efficient, fair, compassionate, and accurate scheme for each and every person as quickly as possible. But realistically, it will take time, and I cannot but ask you to bear with us, although there's no justification in me asking you to do that, because we all know you've all been waiting far too long. But with that, I wish you well, and we will, of course, keep in contact with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Robert. So just to wrap up, again, a huge thank you for everyone who's attended and giving up some of your evening to share your questions with us. None of those questions will go unheard. We'll be reading through each and every one of them. We'll be replying on those themes via regular channels such as the community update and social media. And we'd also love to hear your views on how this went. It's our first one. I'm sure there are many things that you would like to suggest that we can do in future sessions. So if you go back to the Slido link, you will find there's a feedback questionnaire in there. Please be as blunt and honest as you need to be. We would very much value your thoughts on how we can improve further on future versions. And we also have our recording, which will be on our website. If you'd like to watch this again or didn't catch everything, it will be on our website in the coming days. And we'll make sure that we have a link to that in our next community update that's coming soon as well. So please give us your feedback. And again, huge thanks. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.